In this video, we're going to examine the pattern that exists with the exponents of imaginary numbers. Now, if we look at, we were told before to memorize I is square negative 1 and I squared is negative 1. And that's key with dealing with and simplifying imaginary numbers. But you also want to look at what happens with I cubed. What happens with I to the fourth? What happens with I to the fifth? I to the sixth? And so on and so on. There's a pattern that exists. So if we look at I cubed is really I squared times I. And I squared is negative 1. And I will leave it alone as I. So negative 1 times I is negative I. I to the fourth is really I squared times I squared, which is negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. I to the fifth is going to be I to the fourth times I. And I to the fourth we found out is 1. And 1 times I is I. And if you were to look at I to the sixth, I to the sixth is going to be I squared times I to the fourth. I squared is negative 1. I to the fourth is 1, so you get negative 1. And I want you to take a look. The first power is I. I raised to the second power is negative 1. To the third power is negative I. To the fourth power is 1. Then you start to see I again, and then negative 1 again. And what you start to see is the pattern repeats in a cycle of 4. And so when simplifying your imaginary numbers and their exponents, what you want to do is try and figure out, how many sets of 4 are there? Because if there's a set of 4, it's 1, and 1's a nice number. And then you look at the remainder to figure it out from there. So if I take a look, if I want to simplify I to the 12th, what I'm going to do is take 12 and divide by 4. How many times does my cycle go into the exponent nicely? 12 divided by 4 is 3. Look at your remainder. Your remainder here is 0. So really that means you're taking I to the 0 power, which is 1. Take your exponent, divide by the number of cycles that's going to exist. So it repeats in cycles of 4. Now 4 goes into 5, 25, 6 times. And that's 24. So that means you have a remainder of 1. Your remainder becomes the exponent of I. So I to the first is just I. So you try it again. Take 17, divide by 4. It repeats in that cycle. And that goes in there. 4 goes into 17 4 nice times with the remainder of 1. Because 4 times 4 is 16. You want 17, so that's 1 more. So that becomes the exponent of I. I to the first is just I. So when dealing with simplifying the powers of I, you need to remember it repeats in cycles of 4. My advice is to memorize the first 4 powers of I. And it'd be very easy to get all of your powers of I down just by knowing those because of the pattern. The basic rule is take your exponent and divide by 4. That's what we did every time. The remainder becomes the new exponent of I. And then you simplify from the pattern. And from the pattern, I mean I being I squared being negative 1, I cubed being negative I, and I to the fourth being 1. So that is the gist of how to simplify powers of I. Take the exponent, divide by 4. Look at your remainder. That remainder becomes the new exponent of your I, and then you simplify based off of the pattern.